Hello, my friends, how are you? I hope you're all doing well. So, let's move toward our topic. Before we jump into the topic, you have to read along with me whatever is written on the screen so that your English also improves. Have no time. This is the story, The Last Bench Boy. How one dream changed everything. In every classroom, there's always a last bench, the place where the quietest students sit. Not because they choose it, but because the world has gently pushed them there. I was one of them. My name is Daniel, and for the longest time I believed that I was born to be silent. In school, no teacher ever called my name unless it was to mark attendance or to tell me I had failed again. When questions were asked in English, my mind would freeze. It wasn't that I didn't understand. It was the fear. The fear of saying something wrong, of being laughed at, of confirming what everyone already thought, that I was a failure. There was a moment that defined me. In 9th grade, my English teacher asked the class, "Can anyone tell me what a dream is?" Hands shot up. I knew the answer. I had read it somewhere. But my hand stayed down. My lips didn't move. And then she called on someone else, praised them, and moved on. I sat there, heart pounding, mouth dry, a storm of regret building inside me. That night, lying on my old mattress, I stared at the ceiling and whispered to myself, "Maybe I'll never speak. Maybe English is not for people like me." But life has strange ways of testing us. One day after school, I walked past a dusty, forgotten bookshop tucked between two clothing stores in the old market. Something made me stop. I went inside, and there on the shelf was a small red book titled English Through Short Stories Level 1. It was worn, stained, and missing its back cover. But something about it felt magical. I didn't have enough money. The shopkeeper looked at me, smiled, and said, "You can pay later or never. Just read." I don't know why he did that, but I took it home like it was a treasure chest. That night, I read the first story. Ali goes to school. He wakes up early. He eats breakfast. He walks to class. Basic lines, childish even, but to me, they were the beginning of something big. I didn't understand every word, but I read it again and again. I whispered each sentence to myself. For the first time, I wasn't scared. There was no teacher, no classmates, no pressure, just me and the words. I made a decision that night. I would read one story every day. Slowly, honestly, repeatedly. A few weeks passed. I could now understand simple sentences in TV shows. My world was starting to change, but speaking? That was still a mountain I hadn't climbed. My voice would shake, my tongue felt heavy. Then I read an article online. Speak to yourself in the mirror. It sounded silly, but I was desperate. So one evening, I stood in front of the small mirror in our bathroom, looked into my tired eyes and said, "My name is Daniel. I am learning English." My voice sounded strange, robotic, but I kept going. I like to read. I go to school. I want to be better. Every night, I stood in front of that mirror. I acted out scenes. I pretended to be a news anchor, a teacher, a storyteller. My confidence grew, word by word. The mirror became my friend, my silent coach. It didn't judge. It didn't laugh. It just reflected my effort. And effort, I learned, was more powerful than talent. Slowly, I began to change. My sentences got smoother. My vocabulary expanded. I began to think in English, not always, but sometimes. And that was enough. Then came the moment that tested my courage. In class, our teacher asked us to write an essay in English. My future dream. I poured my heart into it. I wrote about becoming a teacher who helps the forgotten students. I wrote about standing in front of a classroom and encouraging the last bench boys. When the teacher returned the papers, she held mine up and said, "Daniel, come here." My legs shook. I thought I had failed again. But then she smiled and said, "This is beautifully written. Well done." For the first time in my life, a teacher praised me, in front of everyone. That day I realized something powerful. I had changed, not because of luck, not because someone taught me, but because I refused to give up. My journey wasn't easy. I was laughed at, ignored, forgotten. But I kept reading. I kept whispering. I kept standing in front of that mirror. Day by day, word by word, mistake by mistake, I built myself. After high school, I applied for a university English program. The day I received the acceptance letter, I didn't celebrate loudly. I just held the paper in my hand and whispered, "I earned this." But university wasn't easier. In fact, it brought bigger challenges. Professors spoke fast. Assignments were long. Classmates were fluent. In the beginning, I often sat quietly, afraid I'd fall behind. But I remembered the mirror. I remembered the stories. So I created a new routine. I would record each lecture, go back to my dorm, and replay it while taking notes. I'd pause the recordings, repeat sentences aloud, write vocabulary lists, and even translate hard passages to understand the flow. Slowly, the chaos turned into comprehension. One of the turning points came in my second semester. Our professor assigned us a presentation project. We had to prepare a 5-minute talk in English. I froze. It was my old fear again, the fear of standing up and speaking. But this time, I had something stronger than fear. Preparation. I spent 2 weeks rehearsing that speech in front of the mirror. I memorized every transition, every pause. When the day arrived, my heart was still racing. But as I stood in front of the class and began to speak, something incredible happened. Everyone listened. No one laughed. When I finished, there was applause. My professor nodded with a smile. That 5-minute speech became a 5-year memory. I began helping others in class, not because I was the best, but because I knew how it felt to struggle. I formed a small study group of students who were shy, non-native speakers like me. We called it the Second Voice Club, a place where no question was silly, no mistake shameful. That group became a family. We shared tips, corrected each other kindly, and cheered every improvement. One of my proudest moments was when one of our members, a girl from a rural background who had never spoken publicly, won the university debate competition. When she came to thank me, I told her, "You did this. I just reminded you that you could." In my final year, I got selected for an internship at a publishing house. It was surreal. The boy who once feared reading English was now helping edit and proofread English articles. But the real reward wasn't just the job, it was the confidence. I was now speaking naturally. I was thinking in English, writing poems, sharing thoughts online. My first blog post went viral. It was titled, "From Silence to Speech." In that post, I told my entire journey, the last bench, the red book, the mirror talks, the fear, and the fight. Thousands of readers responded. Some said it gave them hope. Others said it made them cry. One even said, "You made me believe I can change too." After graduation, I returned to my high school, not as a student, but as a guest speaker. The moment I stepped onto the stage in that familiar hall, memories flooded in. I stood behind the podium and looked at the back row. There were students just like me, quiet, watching, doubting themselves. I told them my story. I told them about fear, about effort, about reading small books and whispering big dreams. When I finished, there was silence, and then applause. But what touched me most was a boy who came up afterward and said, "Sir, I also sit in the last row. But today, I felt like I can move forward." Now, I travel to schools, colleges, and community centers. I give talks on language and self-worth. I help learners find their voice. I always start with one sentence. My name is Daniel, and I was once too afraid to speak. That line opens hearts, because people don't need perfection, they need honesty. My journey to 14,000 words wasn't just a writing goal, it was a metaphor. Every word was a step, every paragraph a part of my past, every chapter a mirror of someone else's struggle. And if you've read this far, maybe you're one of them. Maybe you're Daniel too. Remember, you don't need to be fluent to be heard. You don't need to be perfect to start. You just need one sentence, one moment, one reason. So here's yours. You matter. Your voice matters. Your story matters. And this is just your beginning. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. You never know how one story can become someone's lifeline. And if you like this video, don't forget to subscribe, because your support truly motivates me. All right, see you in the next video. Take care, my friend. Goodbye.